The great hall of the Galactic Council Station trembled with fear. Dozens of alien beings from across the galaxy filled the massive chamber, their voices creating a symphony of panic that echoed off the crystal walls. Some floated in the air. Others stood on multiple legs, and a few existed as pure energy contained in special suits. But all of them shared the same terrified expression. Ambassador Keth of the Zephyrian people stood at the center podium, his 4 blue arms shaking as he tried to calm the crowd. His tall, slender body seemed to glow under the chamber's soft lights, but his usual confident demeanor had vanished completely. Behind him, a massive holographic display showed star maps with red zones spreading like a disease across 17 solar systems. "Fellow beings of peace," Keth said, his voice cracking with emotion. "The situation has grown worse. 3 more worlds fell to the Devourers yesterday. The mechanical plague continues to spread, and our finest minds cannot find a solution." In the observer section, Captain Jake Morrison sat quietly in his simple human uniform. He was a tall man with brown hair and calm eyes, representing Earth at these council meetings. Most aliens barely noticed him. Humans had only made contact with the galactic community 2 years ago, and everyone considered them a primitive species. From some backwater planet, Jake watched as the various alien representatives shared their reports. The Mindari delegate, a creature that looked like a walking tree with glowing bark, spoke through telepathy that translated into words for everyone to hear. Our psychic warriors attempted to contact the Devourer's consciousness. There is nothing. There, they are pure machine, driven only by the need to consume and replicate. A being made of crackling energy inside a containment suit added, "The Luminos Collective tried to disrupt their power sources. Our energy forms passed right through their shields. Whatever technology they use, it is beyond our understanding." The holographic display shifted to show footage from the latest attack. Massive mechanical creatures, each the size of a city building, descended on a peaceful world covered in purple forests. The machines had spinning blades, plasma cutters, and drilling arms that tore through everything in their path. Within hours, the entire planet's surface was stripped bare, its materials converted into more Devourer units. Jake felt his stomach turn as he watched the footage. The aliens who lived on that world had tried to evacuate, but the Devourers moved too fast. Their ships were beautiful works of art, designed for exploration and peaceful travel, not warfare. The mechanical swarm cut through them like paper. "Pattern is always the same," Keth continued, his voice growing more desperate. "They arrive without warning, consume everything organic, process the materials into more of their kind, then move to the next system. We have lost 17 worlds. In 3 standard cycles. At this rate, the entire galaxy will fall within 50 cycles." A representative from the collective, a species that shared one mind across billions of bodies, stood up. Her humanoid form was pale, and her eyes completely white. "The collective has run every possible simulation. Our defensive technologies are insufficient. Our ships are designed for peace, not war. We have never needed weapons of mass destruction, because we are civilized beings," added the Mindari delegate. "We have evolved beyond the need for violence. We solve conflicts through discussion, compromise, and understanding. But these machines cannot be reasoned with." Jake listened to the debate that followed. Every suggestion seemed to lead nowhere. The aliens had tried everything their advanced civilizations could think of. Energy weapons, psychic attacks, computer viruses, even attempts at communication. Nothing worked. The Devourers simply consumed and replicated. Following some unknown program that drove them forward, hours passed as the debate continued. Some aliens suggested hiding in distant galaxies. Others proposed building massive shields around their remaining worlds. A few even mentioned surrendering and hoping the machines would show mercy. But deep down, everyone knew these were desperate. Ideas from beings who had never faced a threat they could not solve through peaceful means. Finally, Keth raised all 4 of his arms for silence. The chamber fell quiet, and Jake could hear the fear in that silence. The ambassador's blue skin had grown pale, and his eyes reflected the hopelessness that filled the room. "My fellow beings," Keth said slowly, "we have exhausted our options. Our greatest scientists, our most advanced technologies, our most powerful psychic abilities, all have failed. The Devourers continue their advance, and we cannot stop them." He paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of dozens of species. Some were crying, others stared blankly ahead. A few had already started to leave, presumably to spend their last days with their families. "Therefore," Keth continued, "I am authorized by the full Galactic Council to broadcast an emergency signal across all known space. We will call for aid from any species capable of military action. We will ask for help from anyone, anywhere, who might have the power to stand against this threat." Jake straightened in his seat. This was unprecedented. The Galactic Council had always been proud of their peaceful nature. They looked down on species that still used weapons or engaged in warfare. The fact that they were now calling for military help showed just how desperate they had become. "But Sir," called out a young Zephyrian aide, "what if violent species answer our call? What if we invite warriors and soldiers into our peaceful galaxy? Could we not simply be trading one threat for another?" Keth's expression grew grim. "At this point, my young friend, we must choose between certain destruction and uncertain salvation. The Devourers will consume us all if nothing changes. Any species capable of stopping them cannot be worse than extinction." The vote was swift and unanimous. Within minutes, technicians were preparing the galaxy-wide broadcast. Jake watched as they worked with equipment far more advanced than anything on Earth. The message would reach every corner of known space, translated into thousands of languages, carrying with it the desperate plea of an entire galactic civilization. As the broadcast went live, Jake felt his communicator vibrate. He glanced down to see an encrypted message from Earth. His government had been monitoring these council sessions, and they would want a full report immediately. Jake realized that humanity was about to receive the same call for help as every other species in the galaxy, but the aliens around him had no idea what they had just done. They did not know that Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, a planet so dangerous that merely surviving there required constant adaptation and fighting. They did not know that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history competing with predators, surviving natural disasters, and waging war against each other. They did not know that they had just sent a distress signal to a species that had never known true peace, a people who had turned violence into an art form, and warriors who considered dying for strangers to be the highest. Honor Jake stood up quietly and made his way toward the exit. He needed to contact Admiral Carter immediately. As he walked through the corridors of the station, he could hear aliens crying, praying, and saying goodbye to their loved ones. They believed they were facing the end of everything they had built. They had no idea that their call for help had just reached the one species in the galaxy that specialized in impossible odds, hopeless battles, and victories that came at terrible cost. The Galactic Council had cried for help, not knowing that Deathworlders were about to emerge from the darkness to answer their call. The message was already racing through space at faster-than-light speeds, carrying with it the fate of the galaxy. And on a small blue planet in a distant arm of the galaxy, Admiral Lisa Carter was about to receive the most important communication in human history. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the command center of Terran Defense Headquarters. Her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and her sharp blue eyes focused on the massive screen before her. The translation had taken 3 hours to complete, but now the alien message played clearly through the speakers. The desperation in the Zephyrian ambassador's voice made her jaw clench with determination. "Admiral," said Colonel Ryan Murphy, her chief of staff, "this could be our chance to prove ourselves to the galactic community, but it could also be a trap." Lisa shook her head as she watched the footage of the Devourer attacks. "No trap, Colonel. This is real fear. Look at their ships, their weapons. These aliens have never fought a real war in their lives." Around the command center, dozens of officers worked at their stations, analyzing every piece of data in the alien transmission. The technical specifications of the enemy machines were impressive, but Lisa had seen worse odds before. What concerned her more was the alien response to the threat. "Their battle tactics are a joke," said General Tom Bradley, pointing at the tactical display. "They're trying to disable the enemy machines instead of destroying them, using precision strikes when they need overwhelming firepower. They're fighting like police officers, not soldiers." Lisa nodded grimly. The aliens had evolved beyond warfare, which made them peaceful and advanced, but also completely helpless against an enemy that could not be reasoned with. The Devourers were pure machine intelligence, focused on one goal: consume and replicate. They would not stop, could not be negotiated with, and would not show mercy. "What's our fleet status?" Lisa asked. 68 ships ready for immediate deployment," replied Captain Susan Hayes from the Fleet Operations Desk. "The Terra's Pride is fully loaded and ready to serve as your flagship. Captain Rodriguez has the Iron Will prepared for heavy combat. And Commander Walsh has 12 stealth frigates standing by." Lisa studied the star chart showing the location of the Devourer advance. It would take 2 weeks to reach the combat zone, even with their fastest ships. Every day they delayed meant more alien worlds would fall to the mechanical plague. "Ma'am," called out Lieutenant Kevin Stone from the communications station, "we're receiving additional transmissions from the battle zone. Situation is getting worse." The main screen switched to show new footage. An entire alien fleet was retreating from a Devourer swarm. The beautiful crystalline ships of the Zephyrians moved in perfect formation, but their elegant energy weapons barely scratched the mechanical monsters. Each Devourer unit was the size of a skyscraper, covered in spinning blades and plasma cutters that could slice through starship hulls like butter. Lisa watched as a graceful alien cruiser tried to ram one of the Devourers in a desperate sacrifice. Play. The organic ship crumpled against the machine's armored hull while the Devourer continued forward without even slowing down. The alien crew had died for nothing because they didn't understand how to fight an enemy that felt no pain and showed no mercy. "They're thinking like civilians," muttered Commander Pete Wilson, the head of tactical planning. "They're trying to minimize casualties and find elegant solutions. They don't understand that sometimes you have to break things and hurt people to win a war. That's why they called for help," Lisa said quietly. "They've never learned how to kill efficiently. They've never had to make the hard choices that survival requires. They're looking for someone else to do the dirty work they can't bring themselves to do." She turned to address the entire command center. "Ladies and gentlemen, we just received a distress call from an entire galactic civilization. They're facing extinction from an enemy they cannot defeat. They have superior technology, vast resources, and billions of minds working on the problem. But they lack the one thing we humans have always specialized in." "What's that, Admiral?" asked Colonel Murphy. "The willingness to do whatever it takes to survive," Lisa replied. "They're asking for military assistance, but what they really need is someone who understands that. Sometimes the only way to preserve peace is through overwhelming violence." She walked to the central command station and activated the fleet-wide communication system. Her voice would now reach every human ship in the solar system. "This is Admiral Carter to all fleet commanders. We have received a request for military assistance from the Galactic Council. An enemy force called the Devourers is consuming entire worlds and converting all organic matter into more of their kind. 17 star systems have already fallen, and the aliens' peaceful methods cannot stop the advance." She paused, looking around at the faces of her officers. These were men and women who had trained their entire careers for a moment like this. They understood that sometimes good people had to do terrible things to protect innocent lives. "Are deploying immediately with full battle capability. This is not a peacekeeping mission or a diplomatic intervention. This is war against an enemy that will not stop until everything organic in the galaxy is dead. We will show these aliens what humans do when someone threatens our friends." The response was immediate. Across the solar system, human warships powered up their engines and began moving toward the rally point. Unlike the elegant vessels of the aliens, human ships looked like flying fortresses. Thick armor plating, redundant systems, multiple weapon arrays, and design philosophies based on the assumption that everything would go wrong at the worst possible moment. Captain Dan Rodriguez checked his systems aboard the heavy cruiser Iron. His ship was built to take punishment and keep fighting. The hull could survive direct hits that would vaporize alien vessels. The weapons were designed to destroy targets completely, rather than disable them politely. The crew was trained to keep working even when half the ship was destroyed around. "Them, sir," said his first officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Lewis. "The crew is ready for combat deployment. All departments report green status." Don nodded as he studied the intelligence reports about the Devourers. The machines were impressive, but they had one fatal flaw. They had adapted to fight against aliens who pulled their punches, who tried to minimize damage, who looked for elegant solutions to complex problems. They had never fought against humans, Commander. Amy Walsh ran final checks on her stealth frigate squadron. Her ships were small and fast, designed for hit-and-run attacks and suicide missions. If necessary, the aliens would probably be horrified by some of the tactics she was planning to use, but Amy had learned long ago that war was not about being polite. "All squadrons report ready," announced her tactical officer, Lieutenant Mark Phillips. "Weapon loads include the new kinetic penetrators and nuclear warheads." Amy smiled grimly. The aliens used energy weapons exclusively because they were clean and precise. Humans still loved explosives, projectiles, and anything else that could break things in messy, violent ways. The Devourers might have shields against energy attacks, but she doubted they had prepared for old-fashioned human brutality. 2 hours later, the human fleet departed Earth orbit. 68 ships carrying 5,000 of humanity's finest warriors, heading toward a battle that would determine the fate of an entire galaxy. The aliens had sent a desperate cry for help. Not understanding that they had just contacted the most dangerous species in known space, Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of Terra's Pride, watching Earth shrink behind them as they accelerated toward hyperspace. She thought about the alien footage. All those peaceful beings facing extinction, because they had never learned how to fight dirty. They were about to learn what happened when someone threatened humanity's friends. They were about to discover why Earth was classified as a death world, and why humans were the one species that specialized in winning impossible battles. The Devourers had conquered 17 star systems by adapting to fight against civilized opponents. Now they were about to face an enemy that had never been civilized, had never known true peace, and had spent millennia learning how to kill efficiently. The galaxy's most peaceful species had called for help. The galaxy's most violent species was coming to answer. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace into complete chaos. Admiral Carter watched from the bridge of Terra's Pride as alien ships fled in all directions while massive Devourer machines pursued them like predators hunting frightened prey. The mechanical monsters moved with terrifying coordination, their spinning blades and plasma cutters tearing through the elegant hulls of Zephyrian cruisers. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Commander Frank Torres, the tactical officer. "There, slaughtering them." On the main screen, a beautiful crystalline ship tried to escape from 3 Devourer units. The alien vessel's energy weapons struck the machines repeatedly, creating pretty light shows but causing no real damage. Within minutes, the mechanical predators had surrounded their prey and began cutting it apart, like surgeons dissecting a patient. "Admiral," came a transmission from the fleeing alien fleet. "This is Commander Vex of the Zephyrian Defense Force. Please maintain safe distance. These machines are unstoppable. We must retreat to preserve what ships remain." Lisa studied the tactical display. The Devourer formation included 47 large units, each one bristling with weapons and armor. They moved in perfect synchronization, adapting their formation to counter every alien tactic. But she also noticed something the panicked aliens had missed. "Captain Rodriguez," she said into her communicator, "do you see the pattern in their movement?" Dan's voice crackled back from the iron will. "Yes, ma'am, they're fighting like a computer program. Perfect coordination, but no real creativity. They've adapted to counter alien tactics, but they're predictable," Commander Walsh, Lisa continued. "Take your frigates and probe their flanks. I want to see how they react to something they haven't seen before." Amy's stealth ships peeled away from the main formation, their advanced engines allowing them to move faster than anything the aliens possessed. The Devourers immediately shifted to intercept, but their response was mechanical and calculated. They moved like chess pieces, following a predetermined strategy. "All units," Lisa announced to the human fleet, "prepare for full engagement. Remember, these machines have adapted to fight against civilized opponents. Show them what uncivilized looks like." The human ships accelerated toward the enemy formation in a direct assault that horrified the retreating aliens. Instead of the careful defensive postures they were used to seeing, the human vessels charged straight into the mechanical swarm, with weapons blazing. "Captain," Rodriguez felt his ship shudder as a plasma beam struck the Iron Will's thick armor. Warning lights flashed across his bridge, but the heavy cruiser kept fighting. Unlike alien ships that retreated when damaged, the Iron Will was built to absorb punishment and keep shooting. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported his damage control. Officer, Lieutenant Paul Grant. Emergency bulkheads are holding. Keep us in the fight," Dan ordered. "Target their weapon systems with the main guns." The Iron Will's massive kinetic cannons opened fire, launching projectiles the size of cars at tremendous velocity. The Devourers had energy shields designed to deflect the precise energy weapons favored by aliens. But they had never encountered old-fashioned projectile weapons. The first salvo punched through a Devourer's armor like paper, sending mechanical debris spinning through space. "Direct hit," shouted Lieutenant Sarah Lewis from the weapons station. "Their shields don't stop solid projectiles." The alien observers watched in amazement as human ships continued attacking, even while taking severe damage. A Zephyrian commander hailed Admiral Carter with panic in his voice. "Human Admiral, your ships are being destroyed. Why do you not retreat to preserve your forces?" Lisa's response was calm despite the chaos around her, because retreating won't save anyone. Sometimes the only way to win is to keep fighting when everyone else would quit. Commander Amy Walsh led her frigate squadron in a series of lightning strikes against the Devourer formation. Her ships were too small to survive direct combat, but their speed and unpredictable movements confused the mechanical enemies. When the aliens fought, they used predictable patterns and elegant maneuvers. When humans fought, they used whatever worked. "All frigates, implement ramming protocol," Amy ordered as her ship took critical damage from multiple Devourer beams. "Ma'am," her first officer, Lieutenant Rick Cooper, protested. "That's a suicide run." "Sometimes that's what victory costs," Amy replied grimly. "Better to die fighting than live in fear." Her frigate accelerated toward the largest Devourer unit. Engines overloaded beyond safe limits. The mechanical monster tried to destroy the approaching ship, but Amy had timed her attack perfectly. Her frigate slammed into the Devourer's central processing core. Just as the nuclear warheads in her cargo, the bay detonated. The explosion vaporized both ships and severely damaged 3 other Devourer units. The aliens had never seen anyone sacrifice themselves so completely for tactical advantage. The Zephyrian commanders watched in horror and fascination as more human ships followed. Amy's example, Lieutenant Ben Parker led a boarding party from the Marine assault ship Bulldog onto a damaged Devourer construct. While aliens tried to fight the machines from a distance, humans were crazy enough to board them directly. Ben's team cut through the mechanical hull with plasma torches and fought their way into the enemy's interior. "This is insane," muttered Sergeant Lisa Woods as they battled through corridors filled with spinning blades and automated defenses. "No sane species would try this." "Good thing we're not sane," Ben replied, ducking under a plasma beam and planting explosives on a critical junction. "We're human." The boarding party fought with a ferocity that amazed even themselves. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, they used mechanical tools as clubs. When their equipment failed, they used their bare hands. The Devourers had programming to deal with energy, weapons, and sophisticated tactics, but they had no protocols for dealing with beings who refused to quit even when victory seemed impossible. Ben's team reached the Devourer's central core just as the mechanical defenses finally overwhelmed them. With his last breath, Ben triggered the explosives his team had planted throughout the ship. The massive Devourer unit broke apart from internal explosions, its destruction visible to both fleets. The tide of battle began to turn as more human ships joined the fight. The Devourers adapted quickly. But their mechanical thinking could not process the human willingness to accept catastrophic losses in exchange for tactical advantage. They had been programmed to fight against rational opponents who valued self-preservation. "Admiral," reported Frank Torres, "we've lost 18 ships, but we've destroyed 23 Devourer units. The enemy formation is breaking up." Lisa nodded grimly as she watched another human cruiser explode after ramming a mechanical monster. The crew of that ship had chosen to die rather than let the enemy advance. It was a choice no alien would make, but one that humans understood instinctively. "All remaining ships," she announced, "press the attack. Make every shot count." The human fleet continued its relentless assault, using tactics that horrified the alien observers. Ships with critical damage stayed in the fight until they exploded. Crews continued working even while their vessels decompressed around them. Marines boarded enemy ships, knowing they would never return. For the first time since their rampage began, the Devourer swarm found itself facing an enemy that fought harder as the situation became more desperate. The mechanical intelligences tried to process this new variable but could not understand beings who became more dangerous when cornered. The remaining Devourer units began to retreat, their formation broken and their tactical programming unable to cope with human unpredictability. They had conquered 17 star systems by adapting to civilized warfare, but they had no answer for warriors who treated death as an acceptable cost of victory. As the mechanical swarm fled into hyperspace, alien fleets slowly approached the battered human formation. Only 34 human ships remained functional, and most of those were severely damaged. But they had achieved something no other species had managed since the Devourer attacks began. They had won. The medical bay aboard Terrace Pride looked like a war zone. Dr. Kate Wilson moved between the wounded with practiced efficiency, her surgical scrubs stained with both human and alien blood. She had been working for 18 hours straight since the battle ended, treating injuries that would have killed most species but somehow left humans still fighting. "Doctor," called Nurse Jerry Adams from across the crowded bay. "The Zephyrian ambassador is asking to speak with you." Kate looked up from the human marine she was treating. The soldier had lost his left arm during the boarding action, but was still asking when he could return to duty. Such determination amazed the alien medical staff, who had volunteered to help with the wounded. Ambassador Keth approached her station, his 4 blue arms trembling slightly as he observed the human casualties. His crystalline people rarely survived injuries that these humans were treating as minor inconveniences. "Dr. Wilson," Keth said softly, "I must ask how your people continue to function with such severe wounds. This Marine has lost a limb, yet he speaks of returning to combat." Kate finished sealing the soldier's wounds with synthetic skin before answering. "Because he knows the job isn't finished yet. We don't stop fighting just because we get hurt." She gestured around the medical bay where dozens of human casualties were being treated. Some had lost limbs, others had severe burns from plasma weapons, and a few had injuries that should have been fatal. But all of them were conscious, alert, and asking about the tactical situation. "Your people fight like machines," Keth observed, "but machines that choose to sacrifice themselves for others. How is such a thing possible? We're not machines," Kate replied as she moved to the next patient. "We're human. Humans protect their friends, even if it costs everything." In the ship's engineering section, Chief Engineer Carl Davis worked with a team of specialists to analyze the Devourer technology they had recovered from the battle. The mechanical components were unlike anything in the Galactic database, built with materials and techniques that seemed impossibly advanced. "Look at this power core," said Lieutenant Nancy Brown, holding up a crystalline device that still pulsed with energy. "It's generating more power than our main reactor, but it's only the size of a coffee cup." Carl nodded grimly as he studied. "The technical readouts. That's not what worries me. Look at these manufacturing patterns. Every component is identical down to the molecular level. They things aren't just building more of themselves, they're building perfect copies." The implications were terrifying. The Devourers weren't just consuming worlds for raw materials. They were using those materials to create exact replicas of themselves, each one possessing the same capabilities and knowledge as the original. It was like fighting an enemy that could instantly replace every loss with a perfect replacement. "There's something else," Nancy added, pointing to a complex circuit board covered in microscopic components. These memory cores contain navigation, data for the entire galaxy. They know the location of every inhabited world, every space station, every colony. Carl felt his blood run cold as he realized what that meant.
Ow.
The Devourers weren't attacking randomly. They had a complete map of galactic civilization and were following a specific plan. The 17 worlds they had already consumed were just the beginning. "Get this data to Admiral Carter immediately," he ordered. "She needs to know what we're really fighting." On the bridge, Admiral Carter reviewed the casualty reports with a heavy heart. 34 ships remained from the original fleet of 68. Over 2,000 human lives had been lost in a single battle. The price of victory had been enormous, but it was a price her people had willingly paid. "Admiral," reported Captain Rodriguez from the Iron Will, "my ship is barely holding together, but we can still fight. The crew refuses to be evacuated." Lisa wasn't surprised. She had served with these people for years and knew their character. They would keep fighting until their ships fell apart around them, or until the enemy was defeated. There was no middle ground in the human concept of warfare. "Ma'am," interrupted Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the engineering team." The data from Carl's analysis appeared on the main screen, and Lisa felt her stomach drop as she read the implications. The Devourers weren't just a mindless plague consuming everything in their path. They were following a carefully planned strategy to harvest specific resources and build something massive in deep space. "They're not trying to conquer the galaxy," she said slowly. "They're trying to convert it. Every organic being, every living world, everything is just raw material for some kind of construction project." Commander Vex of the Zephyrian fleet appeared. On the communication screen, his blue face showing exhaustion and grief. "Admiral Carter, we have received word from our homeworlds. The Devourer attacks have resumed on 3 more systems. Your victory here has only delayed them, not stopped them." Lisa studied the tactical display showing Devourer movements across the galaxy. The pattern was becoming clear. While the alien fleets fought defensive battles and tried to protect individual worlds, the mechanical swarm was systematically harvesting specific materials needed for their ultimate goal. "Commander Vex," she said, "we need to stop thinking defensively. Every world we try to protect just gives them more time to complete their project. We need to find their main construction site and destroy it." The alien commander's expression showed shock. "Admiral, such an attack would be incredibly dangerous. We'd be venturing into unknown space with no support and no chance of retreat. It would be suicide for any fleet that attempted it."
Maybe,
Lisa replied calmly. "But it's the only way to end this permanently. The Devourers will keep coming until we cut off the head of the snake." Captain Rodriguez's image appeared on a secondary screen, his face grim but determined. "Admiral, the Iron Will can barely make hyperspace. But if you're planning what I think you're planning, my crew is ready." In each one acknowledging the suicidal nature of the proposed mission, but volunteering anyway, the alien observers listened in amazement as the entire human fleet committed to a course of action that any rational species would reject immediately. "Cannot be serious," Keth protested. "Your people have already suffered enormous casualties. To risk the remainder of your fleet on such a desperate gamble would be madness." Lisa turned to face the Zephyrian ambassador, her expression calm despite the chaos around her. "Ambassador, your people called for help because you couldn't stop the Devourers. We've shown you that they can be defeated, but it requires a willingness to risk everything for victory." She gestured to the tactical display showing the spreading red zones where Devourer attacks continued. "Every hour we delay means more worlds fall to the machines. Every day we spend trying to find a safe solution means more innocents die.
sometime.
The only way to save lives is to risk the lives of those willing to fight." The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed the weight of her words. The humans had already proven they were willing to die for strangers, but now they were proposing to sacrifice their entire remaining fleet for a chance to end the threat permanently. "Your species is either the bravest or the most foolish in the galaxy," Vex said quietly. "Maybe both," Lisa replied. "But we're the only ones willing to do what needs to be done." The data from engineering showed the location of the Devourer construction, site deep in an uncharted nebula, Intelligence suggested it was heavily defended by thousands of mechanical units, making any attack virtually suicidal. But it was also the heart of the entire operation. It's a place where all the harvested materials were being converted into something that could threaten the entire galaxy. As the human fleet prepared for what would likely be their final mission, the alien survivors watched in wonder and terror. They'd called for military assistance and received warriors willing to die for people they had never met. The humans were about to prove that sometimes salvation came not from the most advanced or intelligent species, but from those who understood that some things were worth any sacrifice. The nebula stretched before them like a purple and gold curtain, hiding the fate of the galaxy. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of Terra's Pride, watching as her reduced fleet of 12 ships approached the Devourer construction site. Behind them, every alien vessel in the galaxy waited for news that would never come. Long-range sensors are picking up massive energy readings, reported Lieutenant Torres, his voice tight with tension. Admiral, there are thousands of Devourer units protecting whatever they're building in there. Lisa nodded grimly as the tactical display showed the enemy formations. The mechanical swarm had been busy during their galactic rampage. What they were constructing in the heart of the nebula defied comprehension. A metallic structure the size of a moon, covered in transmission arrays and processing centers that pulsed with stolen energy from a dozen conquered worlds. "My God," whispered Captain Rodriguez from the Iron Will. "It's a galaxy-wide broadcasting station. They're planning to transmit some kind of signal to every inhabited world simultaneously." Chief Engineer Carl Davis had spent the journey analyzing captured Devourer technology. His voice crackled over the communication system with barely controlled panic. "Admiral, if they complete that transmission array, they can convert every electronic device in the galaxy into a Devourer production facility. Every computer, every communication system, every automated factory. They could transform entire civilizations without sending a single ship." The implications hit the human commanders like a physical blow. The 17 worlds consumed so far were just the beginning. The Devourers planned to turn the galaxy's own technology against it, converting billions of beings into mechanical servants while they watched helplessly. "All ships," Lisa announced to her tiny fleet, "this is our last chance. If we fail here, every living being in the galaxy becomes raw material for these machines. Remember what we're fighting for." The human ships accelerated into the nebula, their weapons charging for what everyone knew would be their final battle. Unlike the previous engagement, there would be no retreat, no second chances, and no rescue. They were heading into the heart of enemy territory with barely enough firepower to scratch the massive defenses protecting the construction site. Commander Amy Walsh's replacement, Lieutenant Kelly Brooks, led the remaining frigate squadron in a desperate charge toward the outer defense perimeter. Her ships were outnumbered 100-1, but they attacked with the same ferocity that had characterized every human action in this war. "All frigates, target the sensor arrays," Kelly ordered as plasma beams lit up space around her ship. "If we can blind them, the heavy ships might have a chance." Her frigates darted between massive Devourer constructs, their small size allowing them to avoid the worst of the enemy fire. But there were too many mechanical defenders, and one by one the human ships began to fall. Kelly's own frigate took critical damage from multiple plasma strikes. But she kept fighting until her reactor overloaded. Captain Rodriguez watched Kelly's ship explode in a brilliant flash of light, taking 3 Devourer units with it. The Iron Will was already badly damaged from the previous battle, but Dan pushed his ship deeper into the enemy formation. His crew worked with mechanical precision, even as sections of the ship decompressed around them. "Engineering reports main. Engines offline," called Lieutenant Lewis from her station. "We're running on backup power only." "Then we ram them," Don replied without hesitation. "Set course for the main transmission array. Maximum acceleration." The Iron Will lurched forward on its remaining engines, heading straight for the heart of the Devourer construction. The massive metallic structure loomed before them, bristling with weapons and protected by energy shields that could deflect any conventional attack. Dr. Kate Wilson worked frantically in the medical bay as the ship shook from repeated impacts. Around her, wounded crew members refused evacuation orders and continued working at their stations. She had never seen such determination in the face of certain death. "Doctor," called Marine Sergeant Tim Foster, his left leg destroyed by plasma. "Burns. How long until we reach the target?" 3 minutes, Kate replied, helping him back to his feet. "Can you make it to the engine room?" "Ma'am, I can make it anywhere you need me to go," Tim said with a grim smile. "We didn't come this far just to quit now." Throughout the ship, similar scenes played out as the human crew prepared for their final sacrifice. They knew the Iron Will would not survive the collision with the Devourer structure. But they also knew their sacrifice might give the other ships a chance to complete the mission. Admiral Carter watched from Terra's Pride as the Iron Will smashed into the transmission array's main support structure. The explosion was visible even through the nebula's dense gases, and the entire mechanical construct shuddered from the impact. But it was not enough to destroy the massive facility. Admiral reported Chief Engineer Davis from his station. "The transmission array is still functional. We need to hit multiple points simultaneously to bring it down." Lisa looked at her tactical display. Only 6 human ships remained operational, facing thousands of Devourer defenders. The mathematics of the situation were brutal and clear. There was no way to win through conventional tactics. "All remaining ships," she announced, "prepare for coordinated ramming attack. We hit the primary support structures at exactly the same time. Set your reactors to overload on impact." The alien observers monitoring the battle from distant space could hardly believe what they were hearing. The humans were planning to sacrifice their entire fleet in a desperate attempt to destroy the Devourer facility. No rational species would consider such a tactic. But the humans were not thinking rationally. They were thinking like warriors from a Deathworld beings who had learned that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to give everything you have. The remaining human ships formed up for their final charge. Terra's Pride led the formation, followed by 2 damaged cruisers and 3 battered frigates. Against them stood the combined might of the Devourer swarm. Thousands of mechanical units built from the harvested remains of 17 worlds. "This is Admiral Carter to all human forces," Lisa said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "It has been an honor to serve with you. Whatever happens next, remember that we chose to stand between innocent people and extinction. Tell them we kept our promise." The human ships accelerated toward their targets, engines overloaded beyond all safety limits. Devourer plasma beams tore through their hulls, but the ships kept coming. When weapons failed, they used their mass as weapons. When engines died, they used emergency thrusters. When life support failed, crews kept working in vacuum suits. Terra's Pride struck the central processing core just as the other ships hit their assigned targets. The coordinated explosion sent shockwaves through the massive structure, cracking support beams and overloading power systems. But more importantly, they triggered a cascade failure in the transmission array's delicate electronics. The Devourer facility began to tear itself apart as feedback loops overloaded every system simultaneously. The mechanical constructs tried to repair the damage, but the humans had struck at exactly the right moment. The facility's own power turned against it, creating an expanding sphere of destruction that consumed everything within the nebula. 6 months later, representatives from across the galaxy gathered at a memorial ceremony on the rebuilt Galactic Council Station. The elegant chamber had been redesigned with a massive wall displaying the names of the 5,000 humans who had died to save galactic civilization. Ambassador Keth stood before the memorial, his 4 blue arms holding a crystal plaque inscribed with Admiral Carter's final message. Around him, delegates from dozens of species listened in respectful silence. "The humans taught us that peace is not the absence of conflict," Keth said softly. "Peace is what good people create when they are willing to fight for it. They showed us that sometimes the greatest act of love is the willingness to sacrifice everything for others." The galaxy had changed since the human sacrifice. The Zephyrian fleet now carried weapons designed using human principles. The Mindari had established warrior castes trained in human tactics. The Luminos had learned to fight with an intensity they never thought possible. But most importantly, when the next crisis came, they would not face it alone. Earth was preparing a new fleet, not for conquest or expansion, but to serve as guardians for any species that needed protection. The humans had proven that Deathworlders could be the galaxy's greatest protectors. The memorial ceremony ended with a moment of silence for the warriors who had saved them all. In that silence, every being present understood the same truth that had driven the humans to their sacrifice. Some things were worth dying for. And sometimes those willing to die were the only ones who could truly live.